To be honest, I've had some trouble finding horror and Halloween-related furry media. I think I probably did Gregory Horror Show too early in the year. It would have been an excellent contender, but being that I don't want to review something twice, I looked on. I checked out various werewolf and monster movie media like American Werewolf in London, Jaws, Deep Blue Sea, all of which were entertaining, but I wasn't sure how to approach them, specifically the shark movies, since they spend so much time around the human characters and not the sharks. But as I was looking and searching, it then dawned on me, the most obvious choice was right there, staring right in my face on my Steam library, Five Nights at Freddy's. Of course, what non-furry or furry alike has not heard of the series? I mean, it's been talked to death by literally everyone, but not as a furry property, more like an overhyped jump scare factory. Speaking of jump scares, by the way, this is your warning. This has been your warning. So, anyway, what drew people to the franchise in the first place? What is its place in the furry fandom? And ultimately, in case you needed a refresher, here's the story. You're a schmuck by the name of Mike Schmidt, who somehow lands a late-night security shift at a dilapidated pizzeria filled with animatronic characters. Now, your job is to check in on these friendlies as they roam around at night, because it's, I guess, cheaper to let them keep running rather than to shut them off for the night. It's also apparently cheaper to hire a security guard. Now, the special thing about these animatronics is that they just so happen to see you as a skeleton for an empty animatronic suit. So once they find you in your security room, they scream at you and force you into a suit. So keep them outside of your security room through one of two doors, but make sure you're not using all the electricity for that night, or else Now, slightly off topic, but there's some debate on why the pay is so terrible for this summer job. Most theories pointing to some sort of timeline all the main Five Nights at Freddy's games share. Supposedly the first one, this one here, takes place in 1993, as $120 would be about a week's pay for minimum wage back in 1993, but this 1993 also includes a free roam animatronic suit and a tablet screen-based security camera setup. There are some holes in this theory. But details aside, this game is basically a dressed-up spooky version of Pac-Man. If Pac-Man stood still the entire time and had to hide from rogue, unique enemy AIs, it sounds a lot more boring than it plays because the suspension and atmosphere make it so much tenser. Suddenly the ghosts become a lot scarier when they change from this to this. The designs of the animatronics themselves had their own special backstory as well. Now, Scott Cawthon, the creator behind Five Nights, made quite a few games before now making his successful franchise. One of them, Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, was a cutesy kids game about woodland critters working at some sort of humdrum lumber production place, which was lambasted by critics like Jim Sterling.
You may notice the dead, terrifying, soulless eyes of the background characters. That's a signature of Chip and whatever the f*** it was called, Chipper & Sons.
And after going into a bit of a depression period, he realized he could take some of those criticisms and roll with it. As explained by Sterling in a retrospective video on Cawthon,
I've had the pleasure of speaking with Scott only once to confirm that there were no hard feelings over the whole Chipper thing, and whatever one may think of his games, I'm not a fan myself, there's no doubt in my mind that he's a stand-up bloke who actually gives a shit about what he does and how his work is enjoyed by people. And even with all his success, he remains a humble guy. Scott Cawthon didn't dig in his heels and pretend he was right while the whole world was wrong. He sucked it up, and he, to use Dark Souls parlance, got good.
Now, it's not just the animatronics that are scary. The scenery is dark and dreary, but not too dark or too dreary. There's enough darkness painted along dilapidated backgrounds to bring out the right amount of creepy. Some other games go for pitch blackness and generic settings for its scares, but This pizzeria is unique and creepy enough on its own that it would probably look awful even with the lights all turned on. Awful meaning scary, not like bad awful. The use of a stilted voiceover via voicemail also gives a sense of isolation in terms of human contact, because he's literally the only human that we know about in this game outside of you.
Now that might sound bad, I know, but there's really nothing to worry about. The animatronic characters here do get a bit quirky at night, but do I blame them? No. If I were forced to sing those same stupid songs for 20 years and I never got a bath, I'd probably be a bit irritable at night too.
Though, speaking of isolation, the game has been, I guess, criticized for the fact that you, as a player, never have the option of moving or running away. Like, why not hide in the bathroom as they roam around, or some little cubbyhole or spot under the desk in your office? Now then again, it is your role as security to watch these freaky furries roam around, and you can't just hide in there all night, I guess. But then that brings up the point of why you have to keep going back for all 5 nights. Is our protagonist that desperate for a measly paycheck? I mean, I've been desperate for money, but not that desperate. Even with a not-so-strong plot, what this game does to make up for it is its use of suspense and tension. There's no music outside of the airy atmosphere, like the footsteps of the heavy suits once they approach your security HQ, the fact that you can't see Security Cam 6 inside the kitchen, only hear whatever is bumbling around in there, and other little details. You hear the terror coming for you before you see it, leading your mind to a paranoid state that ups the stakes, which means, basically, this game was well designed, especially in terms of sound design, and I know a little something about sound design. And while the story is based more around the game design rather than an actual story, it serves its purpose. Before I go into the spoiler section, I just want to let you know, regular viewers of mine, don't bother the kids too much that watch this video. Some of them don't spell that well. Some of them might be using their parents' YouTube account to watch Five Nights at Freddy's videos because that's the only form of entertainment they have or know about. Just be nice to them, you know? If they get a bit overzealous, try to calm them, don't bully them. So anyway, here's the spoiler section. Skip to this time to avoid spoilers, and if you don't care, keep watching. Now I do like how that stilted phone guy, voiced by Scott himself, sort of brings enough comedy for this game to not take itself too seriously. It's sort of the dark humor you would expect from a horror media. Kind of sad that he doesn't make it all 5 nights, but this is a horror game after all, and what's horror without a little bit of death? I do like how after night 5, it's one big cop-out by the owners to just kick you out for quote-unquote tampering with the animatronics and foul smell. You know, just, you smell awful. Go away. Please. I'm probably not going to discuss the underlying lore behind this game. There are other videos for that already on YouTube, and judging from how the series has been going, not even Scott knows all the answers. In my opinion, he's kind of winging it, and that's another criticism I had for the series, but there's probably something about dead kids and childhood trauma in there somewhere. It's whatever MatPat says, I don't know. Okay, spoilers over. Overall, if you don't mind micromanaging gameplay that can be a little bit repetitive, and can handle the fear and suspense that this series has to offer, then I would suggest this for your late night spook session. But now comes the more important question. How furry is it? Let's comb through 5 nights using my chance system, a handy rubric I use to break down furry aspects in media. Those being cast, harmony, anthropocentrism, narrative, commonality, and expression. Let's start with cast, or how many narratively important characters that are furry. We have the main 4 animatronics, Freddy, a bear that is the star of the show, Bonnie, a bunny rabbit, Chica, a chicken, and Foxy, a pirate fox, who hides inside of his cove because he's very shy for the most part until around night 3. There's also the rare occurrence of a golden Freddy, which is said to be a hallucination by the player character himself, and a good excuse to have a creepy in-game glitch as well. That's about it outside of you and Phone Guy, so I'd call this an anthropomorphic majority, bringing this to a 3 out of 4. Now, next is harmony, or how natural the furries are to the setting. Based on the game's plot, these free-roaming robots that may or may not be haunted husks, depending on what the current theory is this week, are unnatural in terms of being monsters. They are human enough to walk around and spook you, but the fact that they're deteriorated machines made to entertain children and are now after you makes them scary and uncanny. Now, what I mean by this is that while they're not completely normal or natural to the setting, they are truly integrated as antagonistic. This would be another 3 out of 4. Moving on to anthropocentrism, or how close these anthros are to being human, I'd say that, again, the fact that they cross the line of uncanniness, that being the uncanny valley, it adds to their scariness. They don't display any animalistic qualities because that might be too weird and far-fetched, as it works better that they act like spooky robots and not spooky animals, who happen to be robots. Animals have minds and souls, while these robots are just machines and programming, and you can't realistically compromise or argue with machines and programming. In this case, a 4 out of 4 in terms of anthropocentrism. And next is narrative, or how important these furries' animal nature is. Honestly, it's just there to add to that Chuck E. Cheese and Rock-afire Band vibe that give people the uncanny scariness. There are even people afraid of fursuits due to the same reasoning, that these are giant human-like animals that don't blink, most likely don't talk either, and want to come up and hug you. This does freak people out. As for the animatronics, I don't see their animal nature being important in the first place, even if I were making this game, so I'd give this a reasonable 0 out of 4. Then we have commonality, or how prevalent anthros are outside of the main cast. If you follow the series later on, you'll find out that this Freddy Fazbear franchise has had multiple locations over the years, from actual restaurants to a haunted house attraction based on the old franchise, but focusing solely on this one game, it is assumed that the only animatronics you see or deal with are the ones trying to stuff you into a suit. So while they do exist, they're atypical at best, bringing us to a 1 out of 4. Finally, we have expression, or how furry they actually look. Now, I like how their ugly and uncanny designs go beyond their perceived gender, meaning they're so cheaply made, and horribly made at that you'd have to be told that Bonnie and Chica are supposed to be female characters, when they both have bulky, agendered bodies just like Freddy and, I guess, Foxy does as well. Now, without going into a risky debate on gender identity, I'd say that this was just made to add to their creep factor. These are androgynous and spooky. That being said, I could easily say that these are humanoid with distinct animal bodies, but less like a normal furry and more like a monstrosity made from man and animal, if that makes sense. Let's call it a 2 out of 4. After a tally of each score, we have a total of 13 out of 24. Now, overall, Five Nights at Freddy's is anthro enough, I guess, to gain the interest of the furry fandom, and surprisingly a cult of non-furries, ages 13 and under. I'm guessing because it's a spooky tale that isn't extremely gory and bloody, or includes any hypersexual content, and they also saw Markiplier played or something. But getting back to the point, it's not enough to really explore its slight furry nature. Then again, I don't think it needs to. Hear me out, it's already disturbing enough to deal with killer robots. Why sort of water it down with an exploration in animal symbolism? It's just here to scare you, after all.
They'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if the suits themselves weren't filled with cross beams, wires, and animatronic devices, especially around the facial area. So you can imagine how having your head forcibly pressed inside one of those could cause a bit of discomfort and death. The only parts of you that would likely see the light of day again would be your eyeballs and teeth when they pop out the front of the mask.
Now, this has been Gregor suiting up with Freddy Reindeer with How Furry Is It? Click on the little like button if you enjoy what you saw. Dislikes are okay. Comments are pretty cool too. And subscribe and hit the bell icon there if you want to see more anthro analysis and antler antics.